Jose has technical difficulties just because he's wearing a suit and pants on below, like down below.
I think I'm having some technical difficulties.
I bet you a bunch of money he's not wearing pants. Bunch of money, bro. Drop in the comments if you have gone on some listing appointments and people have been asking you about, the NAR settlement and compensation. People are going to be asking you about it. You do need to be prepared. So that's what we're here doing, is preparing you guys with specifically what to say and how to say it. Not here to pontificate on what we think is going to happen, but what we need to be doing right now. Now, Hosey is a listing machine out in the NAR, as they call it. You've gone on a bunch of appointments, and probably like 90% of them have asked you about it, correct?
Yeah, but even then, like, I realized that I need to shorten it up. So I was having a conversation with an agent today, and I'm like, look, whenever a different situation or objection comes out, I realize it's something that I need to practice to come up with a response. So it's funny because I was role playing with a guy. Shout out to a guy named Matt Green from Philadelphia, rock solid role play partner. And we started working on some different dialogue as to how to handle it, basically. But I realized that even myself, I was finding myself over explaining how to handle this, basically.
So what were you seeing? Like, what were you doing from an over explanation point?
So from an over explanation point, when they were asked me like what it was, I would just be like, well, look, there's actually one change. The change is that you can't, or not one change. There's a couple of different changes. One of the most important changes is that you can't publicly advertise how much you're offering towards the buyer's agent in terms of compensation. But I wasn't turning it back around in terms of why they should still offer a buyer's compensation. And after the end of role play, what I realized is that the commission is a marketing tool to drive exposure to the property.
That's right. So you were getting lost in kind of
the details of
the details
what's going on,
instead of saying something like, well, now that we've come to an agreement as far as what I'm going to be doing for you, the representation, and what I'm going to be compensated to do that. Now we're going to have a conversation about compensating the buyer's agent in the form of a percentage of an agreed upon purchase and sales agreement, or in the form of a concession, and the advantages and disadvantages of doing so. Because I am sure, Jose, you have heard some of the news with regards to this NAR settlement. Have you heard anything about it? Yeah. So my intention in this moment is really just to go over that. And that way you can decide what you feel is best. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Now, I want to be clear that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the property. Can I explain to you what I mean? So that's how you can get to it.
That's how you bridge it, basically, right there.
You get to it really fast. And then they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, let's say that, there are 25 properties available for sale between $600,000 and $700,000 that are within a 5-mile radius of where we're sitting. And 20 of them are offering out some form of compensation to the buyer's agent, and 5 of them are offering out nothing. As a full-time commission-based salesperson, which properties do you think you'd be more inclined to show and sell? And then be quiet. And people are intelligent, bro. They're going to be like, well, yeah, the ones that are offering out compensation. Exactly. Now, here's where you can drill it down and anchor it. You say, why is that? Get them to tell you. So what Jose is doing, which is awesome, this is real time. And he's one of the best agents in the country, guys. Okay. Over $2 million in gross commission income. And he's realizing in 2023, as he's doing it, he's like, wait a minute, I'm talking too much. Like, I need to the economy of words, and how can I ask questions to help me to get there faster?
And overcomplicating it as well, too. But I noticed that. But if you think about it, like how many times are we doing this by not learning what to say? So the only adjustment that I would say to what you just said, it's funny because Matt came up with the same exact thing. He's like, let's pretend that there's 10 houses available for sale, and 8 of them are willing to pay a commission, and then 2 of them are not. Now, if you were a buyer, knowing that if the seller doesn't pay a commission, you're going to be responsible for that commission, meaning like you're going to be paying the commission, which one of those 10 houses would you want to see first? So almost like not even making it about the agent, making it about the buyer. Like, hey, like if the responsibility is now on the buyer to pay the commission, and there's 8 of the houses offering a concession and 2 of them are not, like as a buyer, like which ones are you going to tell your agent, hey, show me these houses? So it's almost like the buyers are going to be shopping for the ones that are offering a commission. When he said that, it was like,
boom. So what I'm aware of is what I did was very good. That's better. So by positioning it and saying, like, if you were a buyer and there were 20 properties that were going to give you money to compensate your agent, and there were 5 that were not going to offer anything, and you would be responsible for the compensation. Honestly, everything after the word honestly has to be honest. Which properties do you think you would instruct your agent that you want to see? And then be quiet.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, well,
you have to come up with an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, you know, as a buyer, potentially.
Yeah. And then when they say, well, yeah, probably the ones offering compensation, and then do what I said, which is, well, why is that? And then they'll tell you, and they'll kind of, you got it. You're like, yeah. So just by you saying that demonstrates that you're beginning to recognize that the professional fee and what we offer out in compensation is in fact a tool that we use to market the home.
100%.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go over the options that you have at your disposal in terms of that compensation, because I want you to be clear. So that way you can decide what makes the most sense for you and your family based on the time frame you'd like to make this happen in and your goals and objectives. Does that sound okay? Yeah. And I want to be clear as well, Jose, whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough?
And then what I was going to say, if you guys want to see Matt Green on this podcast or on this basic in an episode, I can talk to him. Comment down below. I'm happy to invite him on. Very skilled agent out of Philadelphia.
I love Green, bro. He's dope. And he's one of the only, it's interesting. And I'll just give him a little kind of big up is that, I would have a lot of people ask me to role play. And the majority of those role plays was me teaching people. Matt was one of the only people that I would role play with that I would actually learn from.
That you would actually learn from. And that's the same way that I feel about Matt, that he's actually one of the people that I learn from, that I take notes. So this is kind of like I wrote some notes, and then one of the things is like, okay, well, are sellers still going to be offering a compensation to buyer's agents? And what Matt and I came up with is like, well, look, that's a really good question. Sellers who want the highest price and the most exposure are still likely going to offer some sort of incentive for the buyers to view the home. Let's think about it this way. Let's say that there's 10 homes out available for sale. And let's say that 8 of the sellers are willing to pay some sort of compensation or some sort of concession to the buyers. Let's pretend that there's 10 homes available for sale, and let's say that 8 of them are willing to pay some sort of compensation or commission to the buyers or even their agents. And let's say that 2 of them are willing to pay nothing. If you were a buyer, knowing that if the seller does not offer some sort of compensation, you're going to be responsible for paying your own agent, like honestly, like which one of those 10 houses would you be wanting to see first and why, basically? And then I wrote down some additional notes. I wrote down, like, for example, do you ever remember a time where maybe the marketplace wasn't as vibrant and sellers were actually paying out a bonus to buyer's agents to sell their property? Do you ever remember a time where, like, instead of offering 2%, people were offering 2.5% or 3% or even 3.5%, or even we'll pay you $5,000 on top of this if you bring us a buyer?
Yeah,
why do you think that sellers were willing to do that?
Exactly. And then what you could do is you could either say it from sellers. And here's what I love about this, guys. I want everybody on this call
basically masterminding right now.
And what I want everybody on this call to recognize is that if you are smart, hardworking, and ambitious, and you have proximity to the right people, you can come up with solutions to anything. Okay?
And that's what we're doing right now.
And that's what we're doing right now. So what just came up for me is you could say, like, hey, I don't know if you ever noticed, like, new construction properties, when the marketplace is really, really kind of white hot, they offer out very less compensation or concessions to you as a buyer. Have you ever noticed that? And they're like, well, yeah. And then if things slow down a little bit, have you ever noticed they give tremendous concessions? Like, they're willing to put in the kitchen, they'll pay your closing costs, all that. Then be quiet. And they're like, well, yeah, I guess they do that. And then it's like, well, why do you think they do that? Well, I guess it incentivizes me to purchase that one versus something else. Exactly. And just by you saying that demonstrates that you're beginning to recognize that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the home. Does that make sense to you? Yes, it does. Okay, so with that being the case, we have a couple options at our disposal. I'd like to review them with you so you can decide how you wish to proceed. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? Yeah, and then go over the options.
Boom. Right there. Yep. I think that's good. The great news is that because buyers. Yeah, and then here's some final thoughts that he actually came up with. He's like, well, look, here's the good news about this. The good news about this is that because buyers are now somewhat responsible for some sort of the commission, even though you're offering a commission, that doesn't mean that you are obligated to pay for it, meaning that it becomes 100% negotiable, just depending on whatever offers we receive, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I think that's interesting too, because we'll see real time. I don't know if I would say the word like obligated.
Yeah.
I would be like, we have an option. And one of those options is that we don't offer compensation. Now, I just want you to think about the ramifications of doing that and the pros and cons. So that way you're completely clear on if that makes the most sense for you and your family. And if it does, great, we'll do it. If not, then we may need to consider a different option. Does that sound fair? Yeah. And then get into, so the pro, I'm imagining, is that what you're thinking is that, oh, that means I'm going to net more money, right? Because I'm not obligated to pay compensation on the other, or I'm not, I even said it. So I'm not going to offer compensation on the other side. And yeah, I can see logically how you would think that would make sense. Can I share with you what would concern me for you and your family if you chose that approach, and how long it takes to get the home sold and how much we get? Well, sure. What do you mean? Now, it's critical there that I say, can I share with you what would concern me for you and your family? Because if I say, can I share with you what would concern me? You don't care. But if I say Jose and, Mariela and the family and how much you get and how long it takes, he's like, what? I'm paying attention now. Right? So, so the professional fee is a tool that we use to market the home. And what I mean by that is the following, and here's how we're bridging everything together. This is awesome in real time. Let's imagine for a moment you're a buyer and you're looking at, 10 properties that fit your criteria and your price point. 7 of them are offering out compensation towards your agent. 3 of them are offering out nothing, and you're going to be responsible for the compensation. I mean, honestly, as a buyer, which properties do you think you would instruct your agent that you want to go see and potentially buy? Well, those other ones. And then follow that up with, why is that? Well, because I know I'm not going to have to pay. Exactly. So just by you saying that demonstrates that it is in fact a tool. Now, I'm wondering if we were going to maximize value and get you as much as we possibly can, which is what you want, isn't it? Yes. Do you think we'll do that by limiting the exposure or by broadening the exposure and showing it to as many people as possible? Well, probably broadening it. And why is that? Well, the more people that look at it, the more money we'll make. Exactly. So when you put those two together, what we realize is that by offering out some form of compensation, we ensure that we show it to as many people as possible. We get you the most amount we could possibly get in the quickest amount of time, because you did share with me, Jose, that the goal and objective is to have this home sold in the next 120 days. Is that still the case, or has that changed?
No.
Nope, still the case.
Still okay.
Well, what that means, I was thinking about this in preparation for us connecting. And what I was realizing is that we have to be under contract, Jose, in the next 45 to 60 days. And that buyer has to be like rock solid, right? Because it takes another 45 to 60 days, depending on financing. And my concern is if we were still here 120 days from now and the home wasn't sold, I mean, what would that mean for you and your family if that happened? I'm like, oh man, that's terrible. We don't want to do that. Okay. So then does it seem like offering no compensation to the other side? Does that seem like it would actually serve you in the long run? Well, probably not. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Now notice, I didn't verbally vomit and pontificate and tell them that it's not a good idea and you shouldn't do that. I skillfully ask questions to get them to tell me, because they're never going to argue with their own information. They will always argue with you, though.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree with you 100% on that. Now, the only devil's advocate that I'm going to play on that, you're going to get like some sellers that are like, well, I would look at the houses that are that I like the most versus the ones that are offering the
Good.
commission. And if they say that, you can be like, well, I understand where you're coming from. And obviously I get that point, or I understand where you're coming from. Now, if you did like one of those houses that aren't offering a compensation, would you make a full price offer, or would you try to offer a little bit less to compensate for the fact that you're having to pay for your own agent's commission?
Love it.
Boom.
That's
They got
solid,
solved,
bro.
because you are going to get those sellers that are like, well, I don't think that it works that way. I think that I would go take a look at the house that I like versus the ones that are offering a commission or not a commission, basically.
Yeah,
Now,
and then what was critical about what Jose just did there, notice no defensiveness. No, like I'm right and you're wrong. It's like, yeah, I see where you're coming from. And perhaps that would be the case. What it leaves me to think about is, I guess, if you were a buyer and you were going to buy this home all over again and you decided that it's the one, and the seller was not offering out any compensation and you would be responsible for the compensation of your buyer's agent, do you think you would still write a full price offer? Or would you try to negotiate an offer or a concession of some sort that could help you to compensate your buyer's agent? I mean, which do you think you would more likely than not do? And then be quiet. And then at the end of that, how you tie it down is, don't you think most buyers would feel pretty similar to you?
you know what I just thought about, Novello? You know how like we're basically brainstorming here and coming up with like, okay, like this little tweak or that little tweak? What if we invited a couple of the top agents and we worked on this together?
Well, and here's the reason why me and you can do this. Like the vision to me is like, we are both black belts in the dojo.
Yeah.
And the reason why we can do this is because kind of like mastery level of just the conversation. So now what we can do is we can hop in here with these variables and we can apply that skill to this compensation, like this compensation conversation or presenting it to other people. So yeah, I mean, I'm totally down for that. If the community thinks,
I think Matt would be a good person. I also think the what do you call him? The Quan or
the ambassador of Quan, Mr. Neil Weichel.
Ambassador of Quan would be a good one to do that. I think him and Matt and us too. I think that would be like rock solid for everybody.
I love it, bro. In my head, you know what that's like? It's like, again, like we're like all black belts in the dojo, and it's like,
yeah. And I think what would result in that, because what happened with Matt Green when I role play with Matt is he helped me look at it from like a different perspective. And even what he said about like making it about the buyer, I was like, that's a different perspective as well, too. So I was like, if you get 3 or 4 different perspective from dojo people, or like black belts.
And then you end up with the best, like the closest thing to the truth. I mean, I think it's awesome. And that little tweak, just like the little tweak I made about not saying like you have to, you're not obligated. It's like, well, let's say you chose not to offer out compensation, because I don't want to use that word, right? Because then it kind of gets in their head like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not obligated, right? And then what he did, the tweak, instead of saying like which properties you think you'd be more excited about showing and selling as an agent, put that on the buyer and put them in the position of the buyer, which I think is a better way to do that, because mentally that's an easier leap for them to make. To put themselves.
So let me ask you this, Novello. Let's say like, and this is the way that I've been getting the question. So what's this I hear about like a NAR, like a settlement on a lawsuit for real estate agents? That's the way that it's been phrased most of the time. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would say, I appreciate you asking. I really do. And I'm imagining like most of the homeowners that I'm speaking to, it's a little confusing, right? And because the media as a whole, I'm sure you're aware, likes to sensationalize and kind of either make people mad or scare them. So what I can share with you is a very brief Cliff Note version of the potential rule changes. And then also specifically what we would need to do to navigate within those to make sure that you get what you want in the time you want. Sound fair? Yeah.
I love that intro. How it's like, it's probably like what I'm imagining that this is probably a little bit confusing for you. You're probably hearing things on the media. You're probably hearing different people talking about it. I think that's like a great bridge and a great way, because they're like, oh yeah, like you're right. It is a little bit confusing. Now, how would you transition after that? Your little Cliff Note version.
Yeah. And notice I said Cliff Note on purpose, because it's like short and concise. And really the only rule changes that they need to know about are two. Well, really one as a seller. And the one as a seller is about our ability to be able to offer compensation.
To the
they don't need to know the other four rules because truthfully, it doesn't really apply to them. It doesn't matter. It's really for agents.
So the transition for that would be like, and the little short version and the most important one for you as a seller is,
yes,
do I need to offer some sort of compensation to the buyer side? So you say, hey, it's probably a little bit confusing. Like for you, I'm going to do everything I can to try to give you like a little cliff note version of basically the settlement. The most important one and the one that you really probably care about the most is, do I have to offer some sort of compensation to the buyer's agent? And then boom, that's your transition right
And they'll
there.
be like, yeah, Jose, it's exactly what I'm thinking. You're like, okay, good. And then you can very just quickly explain that we can no longer offer compensation in the multiple listing service. However, we still can offer compensation. So what I'd like to do now is explain to you the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of offering out compensation. So that way you can make the decision that you feel is best. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough. So what we've just done here live real time, which is dope, in the laboratory, because we're scientists in the lab, just cooking it up, bro. Like my son says, yo, let me cook, Dad. Let me cook.
Well, what I like about it is that I'm learning as well too, and I'm like learning my tweaks as to what tweaks I need to do. So I'm learning a little bit from you. I'm learning a little bit from Matt. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up writing it down just like I did with Matt, and then I'm basically gonna repeat it over and over and over until it gets internalized, until I can say it very simply, very eloquently, and then just basically present it in a way where I'm not over explaining things.
No, easy peasy. Yeah, and you're not over explaining it. So, and what I'm aware of is we're also going to disseminate all of that information to our partners at the Elite Builders. So that way they're fully equipped and, you know, with what to say and how to say it. So yeah, this is a very kind of, again, I like to call it economy of words. We're taking what was taking Jose maybe 5 to 10 minutes to explain, and we're shrinking it down, and we're asking a few questions. And then we could be like, yeah, you know, the main change that really like has any impact on you is whether or not we're going to offer out compensation to a cooperating broker, you know, someone who brings us a buyer. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go over with you the pros and cons, right? The advantages and disadvantages of offering out compensation. So that way you're crystal clear, and then you can make a decision that you feel is best for you and your family, and whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? Yeah. And then you can go into that analogy, which we just pieced together, which is like, so let's imagine, I believe that the best way for me to kind of explain this is to give you an analogy. So let's imagine for a moment that you guys, Jose and Mariela, are buying a home. And there are 10 properties that fit the criteria, you know, beds, baths, square footage, location, schools. And 7 of them are offering out compensation to the cooperating broker, your agent, your buyer's agent, who's helping you to find the home. And 3 of them are offering out nothing, which would mean you would be responsible to compensate your agent. I mean, the question would be is, as a buyer, honestly, which properties do you think you would instruct your agent to actually get you access to so you can decide if you want to buy? Ones that would compensate your agent so you don't have to come out of pocket, or other ones where you would have to come out of pocket and be quiet? And they're going to be like, well, probably the ones that where I don't have to come out of pocket. And then here's the key thing. You got to anchor that down. Why is that? Not you, blah, 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 blah. Why is that? Well, because, you know, it would save me some capital, you know what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't have to bring as much to closing. Exactly. And then here's how you anchor it down again. Just by you, here's how you anchor it down again. Don't you think most buyers who are going to be looking at your home would feel the same way? Shut up. Yeah, probably. Exactly. So just by you saying that, you recognize that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the home. So now what we can do is we can discuss compensation, right? And the different options that we have. And again, whatever you decide, I'll support you. Fair enough? Yep. And then you go into it. So the first form of compensation that we can offer is a concession of some sort, because we are still allowed to put that in the multiple listing service. And what I see is in this price point, right, whatever that price point is, and you can figure this out, right, somewhere around 10 to 12,000 bucks. And what we're doing there is we're either giving them the money to compensate their agent, or you're giving them money to help them with their closing costs, which frees up the capital to be able to compensate their agent. The second option you can do is what we have been doing for, over 100 years, is that you offer a percentage of the agreed upon purchase, or the last 30 years or 40 years, 50 years, whatever the number is. We offer out a percentage of the agreed upon purchase and sales price towards compensation to the buyer's agent. And in doing so, we radically kind of expand the exposure, and that'll increase the probability we'll get the most amount in the quickest amount of time. Now, either one of those are okay, based on what you're looking to accomplish and why, based on the time frame you'd like to make this happen in. Which one of these do you think would serve you best? Notice I didn't give them the option to offer out nothing, because we already handled that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then whatever they say you're cool with. If they're like, yeah, like let's offer out this. Like, okay, great. So I did a net sheet for you. What that means, you're going to net this. So we've come to an agreement in terms of, we've come to an agreement in terms of what we're going to be doing and what we're going to be compensating and how we're going to be compensating the other agent and where we're going to position the property price-wise. So do you have any other questions or concerns for me before we take care of the appropriate paperwork?
I don't.
Sign away, team. That's how you do that.
So what we're going to do for our EXP Elite Builders is we're actually going to go out, and I'll probably take the lead on this, meaning like to transcribe it and then post it on the group chat that we have.
Love it.
And the reason is I want to figure this out, because this, like, one fumble on this could cost me $20,000.
Yes.
5 fumbles on this could cost me $100,000, basically.
That's not hyperbole. Like, it's a 1,000% true.
Yeah.
Right? So this nuanced conversation, very skilled, it's an emergency that you figure it out. Okay. So there's different levels of like urgency. All of us on this kind of stream, or if you're watching afterwards, you've probably had something that's like, there's stuff that's like not important, so you don't pay any attention to it. But then there's stuff that's important. But even if it's important, it may sit on your list for like a month and it doesn't get done. But then there's things that are emergencies. And if you think about this, if you've ever experienced an emergency in your life, you drop everything that you're doing immediately to handle it. And this is one of those things. It's an emergency. So you have to drop everything that you're doing and learn this conversation, because it will be the difference between taking listings and not. It will be the difference between, like Jose said, fumbling the ball and, watching somebody else in your market list the property and make whatever the professional fee is.
Not only that, but like I've taken so many listings because people are like, you just explain things so much simpler to me in a way that I can understand them. And it's funny because the way I'm looking at it is I was having a conversation with my brother-in-law yesterday, and he took a listing, which he's a listing agent for the team now. We're building out listing agents now.
Let's go.
And he had an offer that was above asking price, but they were asking for a credit, but the net was still above asking price for the seller. So like, let's say the offer was 700,000 or the list price was 700,000. They were offering him 730 with $25,000 back in credit. And the seller wanted to keep the 730, but he wanted to offer less basically in terms of credit. And it's the only offer on the table. And we didn't even think that he was going to be able to get a full price offer on the property. So I told him like what to say. I told him, look, like, a lot of people, for whatever reason, have trouble offering out credits to the buyers because they feel like it's taking money away from them. And when I told them, I was like, well, ask them this. Yeah, let's forget about this offer and let's pretend that you received the full price offer at 700,000 and it had 0 credits. How would you respond to that? Like, is that something that would be acceptable to you? He's like, yeah, it would be acceptable to me. So look, the way I would look at it is I wouldn't look at it like you're offering them a $25,000 credit. I would look at it in a way where I'm more focused on the net. So if you look at it, it's a 730 offer, but they're asking $25,000 credit. It's a net offer of 705. So I would look at it almost as if it was a 705 offer with no credits being offered, as opposed to I'm giving the buyers a $25,000 credit.
Yeah.
It's the same net to you, is just being structured and presented differently.
Yeah. And I love what you did there as far, and again, this is part of that skill. Like, just people are going to have to be more skilled because there's going to be more negotiating because professional fees and credits and all this other stuff. So it's like, well, I love that you opened up with a question. So it's like, well, let's think about this together. If somebody was to offer you a $700,000 offer with no credits, how would you feel about that?
I would be excited.
All right.
Exactly.
And I figured you would say that. I was imagining you would say that. So when I look at this, and let's say they're offering us, 735 with a $25,000
Credit.
credit. What I'm focused on for you, because like my intention is to help you to maximize value and get you as much as you possibly can. It's actually a net offer to you of 705 or 710. And really you end up netting more money. Your goal and objective is to net more, isn't it? And they'll be like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, okay. So then being that that's the case, I mean, what do you think we should do here? And then just be quiet and let them process that. And they'll be like, well, I guess I never thought about it that way, but it is a better offer. Exactly. I agree with you that it is. Now notice, nowhere in here are me and Jose fighting with you. Nowhere in me and Jose, like, what are you thinking? See what Jose just said there is really good. And he's again, world-class salesperson and listing agent. He's like, yo, I noticed like I'm over explaining stuff. And how many times do we see Jose in that role play group that we do, the Zoom thing, where a lot of our feedback is precisely that, is people are talking too much, over explaining, like all this other stuff, versus just asking key questions to understand, like, because by asking the question, you're getting to like a key concept without having to explain it, which is that net is more important than gross. But by asking the question and giving an example, that's registering in his brain without Jose having to explain the difference between net and gross. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, not only that, but like I am imagining that my brother-in-law isn't the only agent that has gotten that, where somebody has a net offer above the asking price, but because they're offering some sort of buyer concession, the seller's like, well, I want to reduce the concession, basically. So when I explain that to my brother-in-law, because I get that all the time, like people have trouble for some reason offering some sort of concession. So whenever you bring it down to the net, it's like, look, this is what's important. The net is important. Like if you received an offer at 700, like how would you respond to that? This is actually a offer of this. It's just being structured differently. And if you want to know why it's being structured differently, that means less money from the buyer's pocket, and that means more money on the loan. So they're structuring it in a way where they have to come in with less money out of pocket. So that's of value to them. Meaning we're just structuring in a way where it's a win-win situation. You get the net that you want. They get to structure it where they're coming in with less money out of pocket. And it's a win-win for everybody.
That's exactly right. So again, it's really, somebody commented, I'm live streaming on Instagram right now. Who is it? Lanisha. I hope I said that right. She's like, asking questions is a better way because they self-discover. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive to the way that we've learned to communicate, which is by talking. But the processing doesn't happen when you're talking. It happens when they're quiet and thinking. But the only way you can get them to be quiet and thinking is to ask questions. And it's a much higher skilled activity, right? So yeah, and if you'll notice, we're doing the same thing on how to present compensation. We're just asking questions. If you were a buyer, right? Like, again, that's a question. Which one do you think you would instruct your agent to take you to? A property that's offering out compensation to pay your buyer's agent, or one that's offering out nothing? And then once they say, well, yeah, probably won't offer out nothing, instead of you going, you have to have the discipline to resist the temptation to be like, yeah, that's exactly right, and, blah, 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 and like verbally vomit, instead be like, well, why is that? Well, because this, and this. Okay. And then another question behind it. Don't you think most buyers would feel just like you? Instead of like, blah, 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 you know what I mean? Like this long thing to try to, and I think what's underneath it, Jose, is like the reason why all that talking and stuff, it's like a need to be right. And when we're not interested in being right, we're interested in instead helping people to self-discover, to help them to make decisions that's going to help them to accomplish their goals and objectives. In order to do that, though, we need to understand the process really well. And what I would say on the back end of that, like let's say with Jaime, everything we did is perfect. And then what I would say to him is like, yeah, and here's my experience. There's two things I don't know with a high degree of probability. Do you know what they are? And they're like, what? It's like how long it would take to get another offer. Because it could take a week. It could take months. I don't know that. You know what the second thing I don't know with a high degree of probability? They're like, what's that? If the offer would be any better.
It's funny. That's what I told them this morning.
You see, like you marinated on it, and then that popped up after you slept on it, right?
Yeah, I slept on it, and I was like, look, Jaime, you know what else I would tell them? I didn't say how long it would take to get another offer. What I told them is, I told them to say, here's the other thing. Like, I don't know if I would be able to get you an offer after this that nets you the same amount of potential money if we don't come to some sort of agreement with this offer, basically.
Yeah,
And that's the truth, because like,
it
to
is
be
the truth.
honest, like the property is a fixture and needs work. And for 7, we both didn't think it was going to sell at 700.
Yeah. And then what I would say is I would add on the back end, listen, my intention in telling you that is not to engender fear. It's just accurate. You know, and then I would give them a social proof. So, you know, we had a client who was in a similar situation. They got an offer with the credits. He decided not to proceed. And we sat on the market for 4 more months. He ended up taking an offer that netted him less than if he would have offered the credit. So
can I make a recommendation?
Yeah. Can I make a recommendation?
Let's move forward on this offer.
Yeah. So may I make a recommendation? What's that? Let's just go ahead and proceed. I mean, again, you're going to net more than what you were initially considering you're going to net. We'll help you get one step closer to Texas. I mean, wouldn't that be great? And then, so this is how you do this, guys. So people think, Jose, they really do think, they don't realize that what we're doing here is part of being a dominant listing agent. It's not just getting people to list the property with you. It is negotiating. It is putting deals together. It's what I would call, what we're doing here is polite confrontation. It's politely confronting sellers when they're not thinking rationally, because that seller's not thinking rationally, right? Helping them to self-discover, kind of clear out emotion, because emotion clouds logic. Because really, what I think is really happening from a psychological perspective, the reason why people don't want to offer a credit is because they feel like they're losing something. And some people in their mind negotiate in a win-lose thing. Like somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And they see it as an L, as the young folks would say, like an L in the chat, right? That's what they see it as. And that's really not what's happening. Like you just have, but because they get emotional about it, it clouds logic and it causes them not to see that a net offer that's higher is better than an offer that doesn't have, concessions in it.
Yeah. And then even that line of like, because we've been on requests for repairs where our licensed closing manager has come to me and saying, hey, Jose, look, I've tried everything and I can't get this guy to give an additional $2,000 in terms of credit. And I honestly believe the buyer is going to walk. And then I jump on the call and I'll be like, hey, look, just so you know, like if you decide not to offer the extra $2,000, I'm okay with it. I don't have a problem with it. We'll get the property right back on the market. Can I tell you what would concern me for you and your family if we end up choosing that approach? Well, here's the challenge that we may have if we put it back on the market. Number one is the repairs on the property that they're requesting repairs for, they're not going to go away. Meaning, like, if we get a new buyer in here, the new buyer is going to do a home inspection report and they're going to take a look at the property. And they're going to be like, oh, I want this, this, and this. And nothing guarantees me that they're not going to ask for the same or even a different or more of a higher amount unless we fix these items. And if we fix these items, we might as well give the buyer a credit for it.
Exactly. And the only thing I would add to that is what I would say is like, yeah, perfect. What Jose just did, I'm unattached to the outcome. If you decide not to proceed, you don't want to give them the 2,000 credit, it's fine. We'll put it back on the market. There's a couple things that I'd like to share with you and kind of in terms of what would concern me for you and your family if you chose that approach. The first one I would go to is, I don't know how long it would take to get another offer. Could take a week, could take months. The second is if and when we did receive another offer, if it would be any better.
Yeah. And
the other thing that's concerning to me is that now that we've had the inspection done and we know what came up, we have to disclose it.
Yeah.
And with a very high degree of probability, now that we've disclosed those things, I mean, what do you think the chances are that a new buyer is going to ask us for a credit? And perhaps that credit could be the same or more. So with that being the case, can I ask you a very candid question? What's that? Are you prepared to send them away for $2,000 and just kind of gamble and see what happens?
And then I've had times where the seller's like, yes, I am.
I know.
And
they're stubborn as fuck. They're like,
and I'm just thinking like, oh my goodness. And that's when I link it back to like the emotional side. That's when I make whenever you said that.
Here's how you know when somebody
judgment.
Yes.
And that's the part that like, my licensed closing manager didn't have that skill at that time. And now it's like, well, look, can I tell you an observation that I'm seeing? You're right. Like the buyer is being a little bit unjust in potentially asking for this high of a number based on the condition of the property. So if I were you, I would probably feel the same way. Like, man, like I already discounted my price $10,000. I'm giving them an additional $5,000. Like, you're probably thinking to yourself, like, the buyer's trying to take advantage, and why would I do this? Right.
Yes.
So here's what I'm also noticing is that whenever a buyer negotiates like this, sometimes it's not logical, it's very emotional. And when people get emotional in the negotiation, they could walk away for $2,000, and then we may end up in a position where we may not be able to get the same or a better offer at that point. So I know that logically it doesn't make sense to offer them that $2,000. Emotionally, knowing that the buyer could walk away, even though they don't have a right to ask for those $2,000, you have to think about it this way. Let's say that we put it back on the market, and that takes us another 45 to 60 days. What are the carrying costs on this property? Like, how much is it costing us to basically keep this property? Like, what's the carrying cost? Like, how much is your mortgage? How much is your HOA?
Yeah,
it's $3,000 a month. Yeah. If you really think about it, that extra month that we're carrying the property and the additional risk tied up to it, that we don't know if we're going to get a better offer, we don't know if the new buyer is going to ask us for some sort of credit. Is it really worth losing this buyer for $2,000? I'm on your side. I know it's not logical. I know it's emotional, but if we think about it logically, is it really worth losing them for $2,000, knowing that the carrying cost is going to be $5,000?
Exactly. Now, time out. I want to kind of break down what happened there. So the first is acknowledging how somebody feels. Because sometimes with conflict resolution, we don't need to come up with like a solution. The person just wants to acknowledge like how they feel. So you acknowledge how they feel. You also said, I would have said it sooner. You said it at the end. Look, I'm on your side. Like, I'm on your team. My goal and objective is to help you to accomplish your goal. And my job too is to keep our eye on the prize. And what the ultimate prize is you getting this home sold, getting to Texas, netting the most you possibly can. So so if you noticed, Jose didn't get into the logical stuff.
You're redirecting them.
And what I would do first is I would address the emotional, and I would like meet somebody right there first, because that's the real roadblock. It's not logic. Now that I've acknowledged how they're feeling, now we can shift over into logic and say like, there's a couple things that concern me. The first one is that, I don't know how long it would take to get another offer. And if and when we do, if it would be any better. I'm aware that in carrying costs, you were kind of to share with me, it's costing like $3,500 a month just to hold on to it. So if we were to put it back on the market and it took us 60 days to get an offer this time, if it takes us another 60 days, you'd really spend $7,000 waiting.
Yeah. Hoping and then, something better.
And then be quiet and let them like sit in that for a second. And it's like, yeah. So, while I'm in agreement with you, like it seems like a little much, and they're continuing to like be a nudge, I would call them, where they're just asking and asking. At the same time, I think about, what good judgment is what's best for the long term. So I ask myself a question. Is it best for Jose in the long term to send these people away for that $2,000, gamble, because it took us 60 days to get this offer, and potentially end up spending $7,000, if not more, because it's going to take another 60 days to close. So it's really going to cost Jose like $14,000, $15,000. Or does it make more sense just to, come to a meeting of the minds and proceed? And then quiet.
And it's crazy because sometimes I've had requests from the buyers. There's like, yeah, I want $10,000. And it's like, for what?
For what? I just want it.
Like, dude, the property is just, I just want it. And whenever you go back to a seller and you can't justify it, sometimes it's like, okay, like they want 10,000 for what? Like, I'm not giving them, they're taking advantage of the situation. And sometimes I've been like, look, you're right. There is no justification for them asking for the $10,000. But here's the way that I would think about it if I were in your shoes. If you do this, blah, 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 I may not be able to get you another offer that's equal. And in some cases, it's true where a property sits on the market and we get a full price offer and they're asking for a $10,000 credit that's unjustifiable. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you a better offer, And it's like putting that on the table, acknowledging emotions, acknowledging sometimes that the request is absurd, like being like, you're right, it is absurd. And if I were you, I'd feel the same exact way. But here's the way I would think about it. Like if we had received an offer instead of a 900, which is full price, at 890 when we originally opened up escrow, would how would you have responded to that? Well, I would have taken it. Well, this is the same exact thing. Once you factor in the credit, it's from a 900 to a 890 offer.
That's exactly right. So, and I want everybody, again, I want to reiterate, okay? This skill that me and Jose are demonstrating to you has always been required if you want to sell real estate in high volume. It has. Now, with these changes, it's going to be even more important if you want to sell real estate
now.
If you want to sell real estate, period, because there's going to be way more negotiation happening, right? Like way more conversation and way more negotiation. So, number one, stay unemotional. 2, stay unattached to the outcome. 3, ask questions, right? And if there is a key component for me is when somebody's not when all the logic's being presented and they're refusing to look at it, it's because of emotion, 100%. And you thinking that you can just provide all of these like statistics and like numbers, and then that's going to get them to change their mind, that is not accurate, because we are not thinking beings that feel, we are feeling beings that think. So you have to have that emotional intelligence. And like Jose did just then, he said, he was like, yeah, like I agree with you. I think they're just being unreasonable and they're just asking because they want it. So we have a couple choices, and whatever you decide, I'll support you. Now, my grandfather shared with me something when I was a young man. He said, Aaron, you got to be very careful about getting angry. And I asked him, I'm like, well, why is that? He's like, because it can cost you a lot of money. And in this particular instance, the way that I would think about it is the following, because I'm on your team. Like, I want to help you net the most and get this home sold. My general concern is I don't know how long it would take to get another offer. It took us 60 days to get one. I know the carrying costs are like $3,500 a month. I also know that, your employer wants or needs you to be out there at this time. The second thing is if and when we did get another offer, if it would be any better. I don't know that either, truthfully. Right? So we have a couple options at our disposal, and whatever you decide is fine. One is we flat out say no. More likely than not, the buyer will go away based on my conversation with the buyer's agent. That's not me engendering fear. It's just what's true. We will put on the market and we will cross our fingers and hope and wish and pray that we get an offer that was just as good in the next 60 days. The second option is we negotiate with them. They're asking for 10. Maybe we throw 5 at them. That would be the most reasonable kind of meet in the middle sort of thing. And I think with a high degree of probability, that'd probably work, right? Second option is we give them the full amount. What my suggestion would be, again, I'm looking out for your best interest and trying to help you to net the most possible and get this deal done for you, is we, instead of offering out the full amount and agreeing to that, I don't think we should do that. They're like, oh no, I don't think we should do that either. We offer out. Yeah, let's start here. We offer out half and we'll see what happens. And I'll fight tooth and nail to try to make that happen for you. How's that sound? And then be quiet. And they're like, well, I don't really want to do it, but I see what you're saying. It's like, yeah, trust me, I wouldn't propose it or suggest unless it was 100% necessary. Again, I'm on your team. I want to help you to get this done. So I'm going to now have a conversation, with the buyer's agent, let them know all the reasons why we think this makes sense. So hopefully my next phone call to you or my staff's next phone call to you is to let you know that they've accepted and we can proceed. Sound good?
Here's the other observation that I'm making. Like I know agents that make a lot of contacts on a daily basis, but yet they don't do a lot of business. And I think about it. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, why are they making a lot of contacts and not doing a lot of business? And the way I think about it, like if somebody was trying to lose weight and basically they worked out every day, but their diet was shitty, they likely wouldn't have the best optimal results. And in some cases, they may not even lose weight because of the diet component of it. And the way I think about this is for the agents that are making a lot of contacts and not taking the listings, they're not taking practice. They're not becoming a student of the game, and they're not like studying the game and not practicing whatsoever, And I think that's an error in judgment for a lot of the agents. Like even myself at this level, I'm noticing that I am fumbling the ball with this objection. I'm still getting the listings, but I don't feel it like I don't feel like it's like I'm saying it like
you don't feel the same level of control that you do in other areas.
That I do on other objections, basically.
Yeah.
Even with me, I'm like, okay, I'm fumbling the ball on this. I need to more practice with it. So I'm going back to the basics. And I'm basically practicing. What's going to happen is by the time this comes out, I am going to be an expert.
And you'll be in complete control of it. Yeah, it's 100% accurate. And I think that I think what you're saying is 100% true. you've heard me say multiple times on calls, like I'd love to be able to outsource push-ups to the Philippines and get diesel. Like that would be awesome, but that's not the way it works. And I'm also aware that Jim Rohn says that, achieving favorable outcomes, or let's call it success, it's just a few disciplines practiced every day. And not achieving outcomes or failure is a few errors in judgment practice every day. So I think that the industry as a whole has made a massive error in judgment and thinking that they cannot be world-class salespeople and not only service clients at the highest level by not being a world-class salesperson, but also get their unfair share of the business. So if you want to play at a high level, business is an infinite game. And it's constantly changing and evolving. I was talking to Neil, the ambassador of Quan, and he was like, yeah, imagine he was selling real estate when it went from like no internet to internet. That was a radical change, bro. They had to like shift and pivot and like what they were doing, right? And, business is always changing. So we need to have the ability to shift and pivot with it. And to Jose's point is that he stays ready. So, and I would tell people this all the time. And I was telling him this when I was teaching him how to sell in high volume. I'm like, bro, I stay ready so I don't have to get ready. So he's already in tip-top shape, right? Now this is just like us at the fly, like he's in a game and something happened and it's going to continue to keep happening. We need to make adjustments so we can handle it and it's not an issue. And I told Sebastian, my son, I was like, hey, recently, right? Because he's he's pretty good at soccer and he wants to play for the high school. He's going into high school next year. And I was like, hey, bro, can you keep doing what you're doing and make the JV team? He said, yes. I said, can you keep doing what you're doing and make the varsity team? He said, no. He knew it without me saying anything, Jose. So I asked him, what would you need to do to make the varsity team? He's like, he thought about it. He's like, well, I'd have to start lifting weights. I would have to pay attention to nutrition. I'd have to touch a soccer ball every day and probably hire a coach. He knew exactly what he needed to do. So what I said to him is like, all right, awesome. Now you know what's required. Now it's your choice. Do you want to be an amateur or do you want to go pro? And here's what's true, bro. I'll love you no matter what, whatever you decide to do. At the same time, it's a decision that only you can make. Because I know the siren call of video games, the siren call of other stuff is going to pull you in other directions. And then, recently I asked him, because I ask him every time I go to the gym, like, hey man, you should come with me. He came with me once this week out of the 5 times I asked him. But the one time he came, you know what I said to him while we were working out? I said, bro, the guy who wants the varsity spot that you want is in the gym right now. And what I'm aware of is you have to make a decision. To me, it's okay to not win, but not because somebody outworked you. The only reason it's okay to win is because they're just better. It's the only acceptable reason. But you want to get to a place as a human that you're not going to not win because somebody outworked you. And that's how I perceive this. I mean, it's no different, where what you're observing and the reason why me and Jose can do this, whether it's here, whether it's in a room of 1,000 agents or whatever, and do it live, is because you get rewarded in public for what you spent countless hours doing in private. Me and Jose made a decision to go pro. And I think agents now with this NAR thing, they're being forced to make that decision. Either you're going to stay an amateur and have a very hard time, or you're going to go pro. And professional means that you are a master of your craft. Professional means that you practice it on a regular basis. Like Jose did $2 million in gross commission income last year. He still role plays all the time. You guys are in your head thinking like, when can I stop role playing? You know what the answer is? Never, if you want to continue to be at the top of your game. Ever.
Anytime I've stopped role playing, I feel not as confident in my ability to present. And whenever I role play, I'm like, I feel more confident in my ability. Not only that, I'm a lot more efficient. It takes me less people that I talk to be able to convert. I'm fumbling less and I'm able to convert more at presentations as well too.
Yeah. So in terms of like error in judgment, an error in judgment is to imagine that you cannot stack time on the acquisition of this skill and still be highly productive. You know what this is? This is a very like aspirational business. Most people have a license to hope, not a license to sell real estate. They have high aspirations, but there's very high attrition, right? Because again, like people know what needs to be done. They just don't want to do it. And there's no way around it, right? This is a multidimensional, multifaceted skill that requires intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, right? And it requires you to practice all the time. And there's so much at stake, guys. You can make $1 million a year, or $2 million gross, or whatever, just selling you're not doing brain surgery. You're not saving anybody's lives. In a capitalistic society, if you know how to sell, you will be disproportionately rewarded for your efforts. It's an industry that creates the most millionaires and the most 100,000 zeronaires. You know what I'm saying? So there's no in between. And what I'm aware of is what distinguishes those who, go pro and those who don't is they take this skill professionally, just like you would learning how to play a guitar, just like you would, I don't know, learning how to shoot a basketball if you're Hosey, just like you would learning how to do anything. And your dedication to your craft will directly result in your level of confidence, like Jose said. But when I say the word confidence, Jose, it's super interesting to me because I'll be like, hey, what do you think that word means? And people give me all of these very interesting answers, right? Oh, like, you know what you're doing and like da. But you speak Spanish, and the Latin derivative of the word confidence is confianza. And it's like, well, what does that mean? What it actually means is to trust. But who are you trusting? Yourself. How do you cultivate trust in yourself? Through repetition, bro. Repetition is the mother of learning and the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment. Like, that's the only way you do stuff over and over and over again. So I remember being in a room of people and I was role playing. She's like, oh my God, you say that to a seller? How can you be that confident? I'm like, well, I appreciate you asking. What you're really asking me is, how can I trust myself so much? And the reason I can trust myself so much is because of the repetition, nauseating, disgusting amounts of practice.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm saying is true because you did it too.
I did it. Yeah. Yeah, I did it. I remember when I used to chant out in the outside of the office, title reps would come and they just look at me and like, they would say in the office, this guy just came back from a seminar.
Yeah.
And it'll phase out basically. But
I love it,
the
bro.
problem was that I had already seen people that have done what I wanted to do, and they shared with me the formula. And once I saw the results that they were achieving and they shared with me the formula, I was like, no.
Yeah, which is a key thing. So you chose somebody who was believable, which was me and perhaps some others, but like where you were like, yo, that's a believable person. He is selling 150 homes a year and he's a dominant listing agent.
Verified it.
I am going to ignore everybody else. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're in the industry. I am not going to pay attention to what you're saying. And then you took the time to like do the work. So I think another thing that happens is like, there's so many different voices and there's so many, different people that are trying to like, tell people what to do and where to focus time. But I think we would both agree as individuals who have gone down that path that there is nothing you could stack time on top of that will give you a better return than learning how to sell and what to say and how to say it. It will serve you in your whole life. You were kind enough to share with me, we were on a vacation in Montana, and you were like, yeah, bro, I told my wife, like we probably wouldn't be here if Aaron didn't teach me how to list property in high volume. Because the listing property in high volume is what led to the units. It's what led to like getting the money to invest in the properties and like all that other stuff. So there's nothing else you can do to stack your time on top of that would earn you a better return in this business. Would you agree with that?
I would. And even like, let's say that you're spending a bunch of money on leads. You're going to get those leads that anybody can convert that are just hand-me-downs. But the way I look at it is you have like a leaky bucket, meaning that you're pouring water in a bucket and the bucket is leaking. So the skills actually help you cover up those holes where you're able to convert more with the same ad spend, which means you're able to get a better return on investment, which means you're able to make more money with less money, which means that you're more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like converting like 1-to-1 for every $1 you make $1, you're just basically breaking out even. Now by practicing, the skills are the foundation to the business, basically, meaning like if I spend $10,000 a month in marketing, yeah, I'm going to convert some and I'll get lucky here and there and I'll be able to make some money off of it just because you're spending the money. But the more you skill up, the more return you're going to get on those $10,000 a month. And basically the better you're going to be able to convert leads. Like I just went on a listing appointment yesterday. I'm actually getting it today. But there was like 2 other agents competing for the business. and 2 didn't get it, and only 1's gonna get it. And it's like, it's just basically like
There's
skills, you
heart.
know?
Hey, there's hearts breaking over Oxnard today. That'll be the fact.
In
So
Cameo, and it's a great listing, you know? I
yeah,
love the where it's located and everything, you know?
yeah, and what I'm aware of too is that, like to your point, like you could spend money on leads, but eventually you're gonna have to talk to somebody. So
Yeah, you're
learning
gonna
how
have to
to
talk
do
to
that
somebody.
is learning how to do that is cool. At the same time, if the skill of knowing what to say is going to allow me to convert, I would propose that learning how to do that first is
Yeah.
the thing to stack time on top of, because not only can you convert people that you don't know, whether that's expired, cancels, for sale by owners, just listed, just sold, probates, whatever, you could also, begin to tinker with that other stuff once you figure out that skill, and that'll help actual, like you're saying, profitability. So listen, this is what we do here at the Elite Builders. This is the good shit, not the bullshit. We equip people with specifically what to say and how to say it. And in that vein, your boy is going to be doing a probate webinar. Probate was 50 to 60% of my business for 5 years. I listed 50 to 60 of those. We just dropped the link right there if you want to check it out. It's a free webinar with your boy, and I'll be equipping you with a lead source that is market resistant. 65% of those homes were free and clear, super high degree of motivation. Jose uses it too. So listen, Elite Builders, coast to coast.
From
Peace.
Cali to Florida.
That's what's up.